Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity Weekly. I'm your host, Fred Cobb, Executive Vice President and CISO at Info Systems. And I'm happy to have Mr. Rob Ashcraft with me on the show today. Rob is one of our senior cybersecurity engineers and senior cybersecurity strategists at Info Systems. And we're going to be talking about continuing in our series of Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls. We're going to be talking about control number 11 today, which is securing network devices. And Rob, I'm going to let you take it away and just kind of get us going with this topic. So jump right in there.
Sure. So CIS Control 11, as you mentioned, we're talking about the secure configurations of network devices. So firewalls, routers, switches, etc. Often when we think about secure configurations, we're thinking about workstations, servers, computing devices like that, which is an earlier control. But this is they have a separate control just for this. So the idea is to establish, implement, actively manage, track, report, correct security configurations of network infrastructure devices. So using as the CIS control says, a rigorous configuration management and change control process. So it prevents attackers from exploiting vulnerable services and settings. And as we look at the CIS controls, there's actually 7 controls in the control family 11. There's 7 different sub-controls there. And typically with the customers, we're kind of focused on the first and fourth, which is, first of all, maintaining standard security configurations for your network devices, and then also installing the latest versions. But we can kind of talk about all these. Some of these apply more to larger networks. At the end of the day, Fred, if you boil down these controls, what you're really saying is we have to begin to baseline a hardened configuration for these devices. So they essentially go forward utilizing once we have that hardened configuration, we've baselined that upon and deployed them with that, then we essentially can go forward and utilize some change management, change control type of policies for modifications.
Yeah, I really am a big fan of the CIS benchmarks and also the DISA-STIGs. You can find either a DISA-STIG or a CIS benchmark for virtually every type of network device you're thinking about deploying onto your network. All the common firewalls, the common switches, routers, etc. So they give good guidance, and depending on the environment, there may be certain controls that are not required. But certainly, to your point, establishing that baseline, get into a process of thinking about hardening devices before you ever really put them into production. As everyone probably knows, or I know we've talked about it on previous episodes, when you take a device, say a new firewall or a new router, and you just unbox it, you plug it in, turn it on, it's really set up from the manufacturer, in most cases, designed for ease of use, ease of implementation. Really, the expectations are that you, as the network engineer or system administrator, you're the professional that's going to determine how best to make that device secure, specific to your environment. So it's very rare for devices to come in a hardened or very secure state that you're going to be installing. Is that a fair statement?
No, I agree with that. And often, network administrators and that, if they're not really security minded, or it's not the top of their list anyways, they're thinking about operational efficiency, speed, and things like that. And so often, sometimes the security controls in that are overlooked. And it's really important to create these baselines. They're not only efficient and they're running well in your organization in your network schema, but also in terms of security. And so, as you mentioned, baselining those, you just talked about the CIS benchmarks, and so that's worth mentioning. Again, it's a free resource. There's other things like DISA-STIG, which is Defense Information Systems Agencies. They have their own implementation technical guides, and there's also vendor hardening guides. Those sometimes are not quite as comprehensive, and I think I don't want to say hit or miss, but there's sometimes they're a little more biased. CIS benchmarks not being biased, and I think they're the easiest to use. They can come in PDF form, download them. So certainly, and there's hundreds, for all kinds of devices, and so we certainly recommend looking into those. And once the configuration standards have, you've got those and you've updated them and you begin templating those, we recommend that you maintain those templates and update them on your network devices, because obviously things change and updates come, and so as threats and threat mitigation changes, so these templates will also change, and so you'll have to maintain those.
Absolutely.
We'll be back with the Cybersecurity Weekly podcast after we pause for this special message. Security analysts believe cyber attacks will continue to escalate throughout 2020 and are recommending that every company, regardless of industry or size, place immediate focus on cybersecurity training and the tools that will protect you from these attacks. Did you know that you can book a cybersecurity assessment right now with Fred Cobb's team of cybersecurity engineers at InfoSystems? They will help you discover exactly where you are most vulnerable to a cyber attack and make recommendations on how to strengthen your defense in those areas. This is urgent. It's an issue that affects everyone in our community. Visit the InfoSystems website at www.infosystems.biz to request your cybersecurity assessment. Now back to the podcast.
Of course, the bad guys pay attention. So for these devices we're talking about that are unsecure, right out of the box, the bad guys are aware of these insecurities or lack of security is a better way of putting it. So they're looking for things like vulnerable protocols, looking for things about default passwords that might be on the administrative accounts or the web GUIs that you would use to manage these devices. And depending on what their intent is to do, they can intercept traffic, they can be man in the middle for attacks, they can just wreak havoc, cause things like denial of service attacks, all these different bad things that can happen if you're not paying attention and hardening these devices, using something like the CIS benchmark or the DISA-STIG, and just good practice to get into. Also, over time, you have to pay attention to maybe temporary holes that you may have created. Let's take a firewall as an example. Maybe there's a project underway and a vendor needs access for a period of time, or a specific application needs this port open for a period of time. So as a network administrator, firewall administrator, you're out there making these concessions in the firewall, and you forget to go back and close those holes after the fact. So not only do you need to establish the benchmarks like we've been talking about and the baselines, but you also have to do periodic reviews of these network devices to make sure that through project creep or some other type of application requirement, you have weakened the baseline configuration, and you need to go back and make sure that you're tidying things up. And we see that a lot where we'll go out and do a firewall audit, and just over time, a lot of holes get poked into the firewall via access rules that need to be cleaned up. So, and that's another important part of just managing those network devices.
Yeah, I agree. So, installing the latest version of any security related updates. This is part of if you have you should have a vulnerability management type of process in place or policies that would be part of it. And we recommend, one of the things that comes in the CIS benchmarks, and you'll see it also in these in CIS controls here, that they can recommend using multi-factor 2FA, two-factor authentication, or encrypted sessions when you're managing your network devices. That's section 11.5, yeah, and no telnet. So never out anywhere. Don't. Yeah, let's not no telnet sessions we're doing. So if you're doing any testing with SSH or whatever, disable telnet when you're done. Yeah, there's certainly some serious inherent vulnerabilities around that. There are some other controls in here that again we don't hit on as hard. You can go as far as using dedicated machines for elevated administrative privileges and and doing these type of things. That's even a more secure way of doing that. And even to take it a step further, you can, the CIS controls talk about setting up segmentation like VLANs and that just for network administration. In fact, they say when you're segmenting, the first thing you should do is the first VLAN you put into place is the one for network administration. So there's you can even take it further down that road. But certainly what we're trying to do today is just bring the awareness of how important it is to get these configurations baselined, that they're secure, maintaining those secure templates, and then installing those updates as they come out.
Absolutely. Rob, this has been a great topic. I know we just scratched the surface of this topic, but hopefully it'll give those of you that are out there listening a little insight into, or at least form some sort of thought process around going back, and you've had network devices deployed for a time, go back and do some sort of assessment, close the gap. You can also do vulnerability assessments, which can expose weaknesses in the configuration, missing patches. You can do, there's tools out there that we use for specific firewall audits that you can go deep dive and look at firmware, rule sets, access, things of those natures. So highly encourage everybody out there to take some time, audit what you have or assess what you have, and also take those extra measures on new devices coming in, as we've been talking about today with those guidelines through the benchmarks and through the STIGs. So Rob, let's go ahead and close it out for today. Again, everybody out there, we really appreciate you tuning in and listening. We encourage feedback. So please let us know if there's a particular topic that you would like for us to discuss. We are going to continue in future episodes all the way up to critical security control number 20. What we talked about today is number 11. So we've got a few more to go, but we're going to mix in some other timely topics as well. So keep those ideas coming, and we enjoy doing this for you, and hopefully you find value in it. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.